Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this week on Thinking Out Loud. We are very fortunate to have with us to get today State Senator Jeff Hayden from Minnesota District 62, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's right. And,
that is actually the same district where George Floyd lost his life. So Jeff is on the front line really trying to make things happen. Jeff, if you can, man, give our viewers kind of an overview of who you are and, how you came to be in the position you're in today.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank both of you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And yes, I represent Senate District 62 in the heart of South Minneapolis, which you guys are probably a lot more familiar with this week than you ever have before. It is in the heart of not only the heart of South Minneapolis, but where George Floyd was killed was probably only about 8 blocks from my house. Right on a corner called 38th in Chicago. And then where most of the destruction happened was on a really busy and long street called Lake Street. And the street runs from a chain of lakes that we have. You might have heard, it used to be called Lake Calhoun, and we changed it to be to Bidet Makaska, which was Calhoun was a segregationist, and we were able to change the name back to its original indigenous name. But there's a chain of lakes there that are very wealthy and very high end, and the Lake Street runs from there to the Mississippi River. We're known as the city of lakes in the state and the land of 10,000 lakes. So lakes are really important to us. And that street and that node is split up into two. One side is pretty affluent and wealthy. The other side hadn't been. It used to be where you buy your cars. And then when the freeway came in and displaced people and the white flight happened, then it became kind of a barren land for many years. And over the last 20 years, Black and immigrant and indigenous people have kind of brought their businesses in. East, we have a large East African population, a large Hmong population, Southeast Asian folks. Oh, wow. We also have, a good amount of African Americans live in that district. It's where my grandfather bought a house about 100 years ago. So that became a vibrant area and a very culturally relevant area. And so most of those buildings and things that you saw that were on fire, a lot of those, other than the big box stores that kind of were at the end of it, but the rest of them were really people of color businesses, which is why it is so tragic beyond his death. But the destruction that ensued was like, if his death was a kick in the head, the burning and looting, and that was like a kick in the stomach. Yeah. So we're on the ground. Yesterday, we had three really tough days of demonstrations. People were grieving, people were dealing with the issue, and then you saw on, I guess, Thursday and Friday, those things turned into things starting to burn up, things starting to be destroyed. And you guys know what that is. Often you turn on your own self, right, your own community, because you're so frustrated in terms of what you want to do. But we started to get some intel that it wasn't just simply your random looting, that there were some outside agitators and influencers, frankly, from the far, far left that believe in anarchy and breaking down the system. And then those from the far right, a lot of the white supremacist groups that are really, I didn't know a lot of them, Hammer and Fickle and the Boogaloo Boys, and I don't know who these cats are, but they certainly know, and they're in the shadows. And they started to create an environment, and we started to see people breaking windows by just tapping the window with special tools. Somebody going in and coming out. Right. A minute later, the whole place is engulfed, right? Not this regular smoldering fire. Clearly, there were accelerants and other tools that I was unfamiliar with, and that started to destroy our community. So yesterday, the governor, along with the two mayors, pretty much said that they can't have that. You are destroying the city, and they put down some pretty heavy, martial law-esque stuff. We brought 10,000. They activated the whole entire National Guard in Minnesota, which has never been done. Every single law enforcement officer, there was well over 10,000 law enforcement officers. The Black Hawk helicopters came streaming in, and they put a hard line on a curfew at 8 o'clock. And if you weren't in, they had some heavy-handed tactics to disperse it. Not something that we feel comfortable with, not something that we like, but I will have to say, and we have passionately pleaded to our community to go home. to protest, but at 8 o'clock, get with your family. Otherwise, we got to really break this up.
Jeff, a couple of things I just want to go back to, because I think it's really, really important to highlight. This isn't just us, right? This isn't just people of color and people who live in the community who are out there peacefully protesting. These are provocateurs who come in. They're agents that do this every time there's an uprising in any city. I think that's hugely important because a lot of people don't understand. People, if you go on social media, you see all kinds of things about why would they burn their own communities? Why would they do that to themselves? How is this helping the cause? This isn't always the people in the community. I think it's really, really important to hear that, especially from the senator in the district. In one of the places that it's happening, it was happening in Los Angeles. Los Angeles, in so many different communities, was burning yesterday. A lot is happening. I think that's really important, though, to highlight.
Right. Well, and I think it's interesting, and as you start to really understand and learn more about social media and how it works, and I'm not an expert at all, but you end up seeing kind of a reflection of yourself, right? So I see you, Lila, and others that I follow. So I don't always get these white, neo-Nazi, supremacy groups and all of their rhetoric or whatever. Maybe a peek here and there if one of them, shoots something at me. And so there's a whole world out there that some of us wouldn't see through the lens that we look at it that is pushing this. And what we found is these things were very coordinated. There were distractions, small fires over here to bring the authorities over there to then have big fires over here. There was a lot of movement, and it was clear that this wasn't some random group of kids or people who were just running from one neighborhood to the other. And while the law enforcement and others were taking care of business there, they went to another side of the city, to the north side of our city, which is predominantly Black. And then they just blew out all the windows in those businesses and set on fire. And the police and the National Guard wasn't there. So then, last night we had to warn the National Guard and the authorities that some pastors and their deacons weren't going to have that anymore. We brought some Black Panther brothers came up from Texas, and they were going to hold down the north side. They didn't see the National Guard coming there. So it started to degenerate into that type of thing, but people just wasn't going to have their neighborhoods taken over. And if the resources are only going to be deployed to one part of town, take care of downtown, try to come to my district where it was rampant, and then put a bunch of folks around the state capitol and these big iconic things, then there's going to be communities like us that are left without being able to protect ourselves, and we weren't going for that.
Sure.
I heard that, Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I saw in MSNBC, Keith Ellison talking about trying to identify these actors and, bring them to justice independently, to so that, we don't get lost in the fray, or it doesn't just seem, he's doing his job on a national level, highlighting the fact that, it's not just us out there that's destroying our community. But there needs—
Brother Keith is doing a phenomenal job here. We have the Department of Public Safety is another brother, former police chief John Harrington, and they took AR-15 rifles off a bunch of cats. So they were coming in from out of town. And so they started to do their intel, and they got a lot of there was a lot of white supremacist folk here that were intent on doing damage while these distractions were there. So they took us a couple of days, and frankly, the governor, and we have an African-American mayor in our capital city, Melvin Carter, and a good mayor, Jacob Fry, and they're getting a little heat for not being taken so long from more conservative people, but they were trying to give us some space. And they didn't want to re-victimize and re-traumatize a community that just got traumatized. However, by doing that and bringing in a bunch of people that didn't live in the community, that didn't care about it, then ultimately they were able to do this destruction. So their decision, and there'll be some pushback. A couple of reporters got hit. A couple of officers got a little aggressive and shot some rubber bullets and pushed some people out of their porches and stuff. So we don't condone that, but that was a far cry than if we didn't do anything, because the folks that were that got the most damage in this, the folks that lost the most, were people of color, were Somali businesses, Latino, Black businesses, because they're the ones that are most likely not be able to rebuild. Target, which is a Minnesota company, will rebuild, right? All these and all of these other Wendy's and even the post office or Wells Fargo, they owe us anyways.
Yeah.
They'll be able to rebuild. They have the necessary money, tools, and insurance. But these small businesses that people would save their lives to open, without our significant help and help from the business community, I'm not sure how they're going to reopen.
Yeah, I saw one brother who had a sports bar that they vandalized. Yeah. He's already raised close to $800,000 on GoFundMe.
Oh, wow.
So people are really mobilizing to kind of support from near and far. I wanted to go back to Keith Ellison because there is a demand, I guess, or for him to take over the case. You know, where does that sit today, and how do we make that sort of thing possible?
So the governor, there is a statute that the governor has that he can invoke on an executive order to take a case from a county attorney and give it to the attorney general's office. It doesn't happen a lot. We have and our county attorney is the same as a district attorney. So we like to have local control, like those district attorneys or county attorneys to be able to they have a huge staff, and often they don't try the case, right? It's the assistant DAs, assistant county attorneys. However, it's hard for me to say because I know, my family's been here a long time and I've been serving in this role for 12 years. So I know most every politician in town. But County Attorney Freeman, I think, has demonstrated through his actions, through press conferences and others, that the community doesn't have any confidence in him. And we need the community to have a confidence in a prosecutor. In his press conference the other day, just kind of some of the things he said and his behavior, and people were having trouble way before then, by the way. But that really was a straw that broke the camel's back. And he's continued to say that I've brought a cop to justice before, and the only time in the state's history that it was the Somali brother that killed the white woman, right? And that's the only cop that's ever been convicted of murder. And so his tone deaf and his political, viewpoint is not sensitive enough for us. So there has been a movement afoot. I know that I've gotten 300-400 emails all across to ask and push the governor, but it's really an executive order that he can make that decision and take it from the county attorney's hands and send it to the attorney general. So we're hoping that he does. Keeping the governors, we have a Democratic governor, we have a Democratic, all of our legislators, all of our constitutional officers. So we all work very closely together. So I think the governor just wants to kind of get out of the immediacy of the crisis of the crisis of looting and burning, and then take a step back and get together and figure out what to do. But the community broadly, progressive people of color, African American community really are imploring the governor to make that decision to give it to the attorney general.
Right. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Senator, I'm sorry, Hans. So I'm going back and forth with calling Senator Hayden Jeff and Senator.
We've known each other a long time. Absolutely.
He's family. So, no disrespect. You hear me call him Jeff.
His mama named him Jeff.
His mama named him Jeff. I'm going to call him Jeff. So, Jeff, what does it feel like? What does it feel like today? It's already, what time is it there? 2:15. What is the mood in the community this afternoon?
So it feels better. The city isn't, we don't have smoke in the air. It's never a sign. I just left the site. We did a press conference just articulating what we want. We have a special session that's coming up due to our. So let us just say this. No, we're going to get this a little bit. So we are still in a peacetime emergency because of COVID-19. So that is happening now. The government has broad authority. That has to get renewed every 30 days. So we are going to go in a special session on the 13th. So we had a press conference there to talk about the police reforms and law enforcement reforms that we want, bills that we've been fighting for, that the Republicans, we have the only divided legislature in the country. So we have a 2-person majority Republican Senate, a Democratic House, and then a Democratic governor. So a lot of the things we want to do, the Republicans haven't gone for. And so we are demanding that before we move forward, that there's a change. We have a little leverage. We have a bonding bill, which is the infrastructure bill that requires a 2/3 majority. And that means you got to come to Democrats to get the votes. And so we are articulating that we plan to hold up and not give them those votes until we can get, number one, this systemic change in the way that we deal with law enforcement, everything from residency requirements to having their own insurance to how we pick them and how they're trained. But now, because of the destruction, we want to be part of the bonding bill as a relief and recovery effort to rebuild. So we had that conversation today. Lots of people there, lots of good allies there helping to clean up and bringing food. That's code for white folk. And a lot of people there, and they've created a kind of a sacred space. There's a church on the corner that was having their service outside, so that was really nice. There's a great mural there that people are paying homage to, and then a circle. Mike Brown's dad was there today, and so we had him speak to us a little bit. Eric Gardner's mother was there 2 days ago. Some of the celebrities, some of Jamie and Steven Jackson and Nick Cannon have kind of showed up, and I will say in a very respectful, impromptu way, not with their celebrity hat on, but with their platforms to try to elevate the issue. So it is a place that is somber and tough. See a lot of people crying, but it is a place in which people are healing and having this conversation and helping to lead us to think about what do we need to do in this city.
Nice. Can you tell us a little bit about the People of Color and Indigenous Caucus and how you guys are mobilizing, as a unit right now?
Yeah, we have 5 members in the House. There's myself, another African-American brother, Senator Bobby Joe Champion, that's from the north side, that's predominantly Black. We have a guy, Senator Fung Her, who is Southeast Asian, and it's the Hmong community. And with people, you might be familiar, there are a lot of those folks in Fresno. But
Vietnamese.
Yeah, they're in that region. So they were the secret army of the CIA. They were nomadic people that didn't have a home, that didn't have a state, but they were used as the secret tool to go between Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam during the Vietnam War to do counter-espionage work for the CIA. And when we left the Vietnam War, we kind of left them there to the communist regime. It wasn't well, and a lot of them were able to finally get out, and we accepted them as refugees. So we do have a large Vietnamese population, but we also have this Hmong population. So there's a senator from there, and then we have Senator Patricia Torres Reyes, who's a Latina from Colombia, and Senator Melissa Lopez Franzen, who's from Puerto Rico. So those are the senators. And then we have about 14 of them in the House that range from Hmong folks, African-American. We have 2 Somalis. We have the largest Somali population in the country here in Minneapolis. So there's 2 brother and sister from there. And then a couple of folks, Latinos and some folks from South America. So that's the largest group. We have 201 legislators, and this group is the largest group that we've ever had. The sister Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman, was just in the legislature and was elevated to Congress. And so we got a decent group. And then, Brother Keys was in Congress for years and now is our attorney general. So we have some strength, and I'm a senior member and assistant minority leader. And so what we're trying to do is to leverage that using the power we have of, if you need our votes, here's what we need in return, and not kind of negotiate our power away, but be really firm on things we think will work. We had the Speaker of the House, who's a white woman that was with us today, and then the leader in the Minnesota Senate is also a white woman, and they stood with us today to say that they are ready to put this on the table. I've been in negotiations a lot, and I'll tell you guys, what this comes down to about 4 or 5 people with their caucus's position, and then they cut the deal and make the decision. So you got to be in the room, and it's got to be put on the table. So I'm in that room a lot. So we're going to carry that weight, put it on the table, take the pressure of a lot of folks in Minnesota. So we're talking probably about a $1.5 billion bill that we're prepared to hold up if we don't get the things.
Okay.
Right. Do you find solidarity in that group? Because traditionally, is Black Americans, when we hear people of color, it kind of, we have a visceral response to it because throughout years we've been lumped in with other groups and we've seen them come and progress and move forward, and kind of leave us by the wayside. So is this a model you think works for the Black community there to be?
It's tough. It is. We have the same issue. So we have a group of African American people that really doesn't think that it works for us. I'm in this unique position of having a multicultural community. So I have a large Somali, a Latino, really progressive white GLBT, and then a historic Black community that I represent. So, for me, as I'm an African-American man, and I'm going to always represent that, and I'm very close to my community, but I also have to represent everybody in the community. It's about 100,000 people. Sure. So there are groups that really don't feel like we get what we have. There are immigrant communities that feel like that they're kind of moving. And then there are people that are helping to push the issue and create the division. And so I have a race right now, a primary race with a young Somali brother that's being banned by a bunch of very, very progressive people that have given him some traction. And so I think, we'll be fine and we got to run. So there, even for me, there is division there. I think what I try to do is to rise above that. Still do the work, still represent my ethnic community, but everybody. I hire staff that's multicultural and diverse. My aide, who you talked to, Adiria Falana, I'll shout her out. She likes that. She is second generation Nigerian, and my interns are always people, color, mostly African Americans and African immigrants. So I try to rise above it, but if I would be remiss if I didn't say that there is a lot of tension in trying to work that out. There's a lot of tension with us and trying to, and as senior members, and my brother Bobby Joe, the other African-American leader, we try to counsel people, don't fall into the trap to only fight for Hmong, or only fight for Somali, or only fight for Latino, because when you do that, then you diffuse your power. If we fight together, we did a big $100 million equity package about 3 years ago, and we gave money to each of the communities that the data said were priority communities for that. So we led that as African Americans and made sure, but that's in our spirit. That's what we do. So we are really counseling in a way that's not patronizing, but is a way that talks about our collective history in this country, warning them of the pitfalls. And one of the pitfalls is to allow them, the colonialists, the slave masters, the settlers here in the Midwest, right? That's who's here, the settlers, the people that ran the natives off their land, right? To not allow them to divide you. Because if you do, we're going to diffuse our power. And if we just retreat to our own corner, then that is exactly what people want.
Got it. Yeah, Minnesota is 83% white.
Yeah, 83% white. It's probably grown since the last census. We're in that now, but it's still probably only going to be, 80, 79% white. But the concentration of it is probably in Minneapolis and St. Paul and a northern suburb and a neighboring suburb. So that gets you up probably close to 30% if you just take that region, because the state is so vast. I mean, if you start at the bottom of the state in Iowa and drive all the way to Canada, the northern part of the state probably takes you 6 hours. So it's not as big as California, but it's certainly
it's pretty huge,
a pretty big state. And it is the metro, the 7-county metro is where the concentration of population. The rest of it is prairie, farmland, everything from the ag industry all the way. We grow most corn. We have most turkeys, stir most pigs, but we also have the Iron Range where all the minerals, the taconite, and where steel was made, and a lot of minerals. So it's a very diverse, and it has probably over 12,000 lakes. So it's very diverse, not only in terms of it's predominantly white. It's diverse right in the core, but it's urban, suburban, and rural, and then deep rural, and then it has a lot of ag and a lot of minerals. So it has a lot of culture. The predominant white culture is Swedish and Norwegian and German. And then, of course, African Americans, then immigrants, and then, like I said, right in the core cities are very progressive white folks.
Right. Yeah, I love it out there. I've been to Minnesota for a couple of events, following the tragic death of Prince. I was at First Avenue with the Revolution. I spent a week out there with them, and First Ave is on Lake Avenue, right, or Lake Street?
Yeah. It's right downtown. It's not too far. It's on First Avenue. You know what I mean?
It's on First Avenue, right?
Yeah. And then Paisley Park is it's in a neighboring suburb. That's where Prince used to just kind of have random parties after the club was over. Y'all would like come to my house.
Right.
Somebody be here, it would be unbelievable. Yeah.
I never made it, man. I've never made it to Paisley, but
Yeah, he was born there. Matter of fact, his junior high school is a couple blocks from my house. So he's a true Minneapolitan, and Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam are right from, like those guys grew up in Minneapolis. So that sound you heard from them, and Morris and Alexander was a transplant, but that really was kind of from right in the heart of Minneapolis. From the Midwest.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Lila, go ahead.
No, I was just saying okay, but I do have a question. Yeah. I know healthcare is one of your passion projects, and I really want you to kind of talk about your work around that. What are you feeling about, maybe not obviously, but how can there not be a spike in coronavirus cases after all of these protests and people gathering and not physically distancing? Are you concerned about that at all? And yeah, I do want you to speak to the work that you're doing in healthcare.
Yeah, so absolutely. There's absolutely going to be a spike in the coronavirus. People were, for the most part, wearing masks, which is also part of the violence issue. That everybody had a mask on, or nobody questioned who you had your mask on for. But that being said, there'll be a spike. We are in the middle of our surge, so we flattened the curve a lot in order to kind of make sure that we had the healthcare resources that we needed. But we're in the middle of our curve, so every day we're at the height. We're climbing. We don't think we were hoping to get to that about the end of June, end of June. I think we're probably out to July now because of this and how many people were together. The interesting thing will be that the overwhelming amount of people that were out there were young, that often are asymptomatic. The problem is they bring the virus home to their family members that may be older. And then, of course, in the communities of color, and in particular African American communities, this term comorbidity, where you have one or two chronic diseases that you're fighting. So diabetes or heart disease or COPD, high blood pressure, those things that we have because of our conditions, when it hits your body has a hard time trying to figure out what it's managing and how to manage, and your immune system goes crazy and it starts attacking itself. So we believe that there'll be a spike. Lucky for us, we have a pretty good healthcare system. It's led by the Mayo Clinic, but we have Hennepin County Medical Center is one of the best level 1 trauma centers in the country. It kind of ranks with Cook County and the one in LA General, I think. So it's a really good system, and we have some really good private systems that are working as well. So we have a good system, but we do expect to see a spike in the virus, which was we had already appropriated $500 million and using the federal money to offset the cost of closing up all the venues and unemployment spiking and closing the restaurants. We were slowly starting to open up our restaurants where we're only doing outdoor stuff now. And we're in churches at 25% capacity. So we were knee deep in that before this kind of unfortunately Ms. Floyd's death and then the ensuing events. Just my background, though, I serve on all the healthcare committees and have since I got in the legislature. My background was in human service, working with people, housing, affordable housing, homelessness. I worked at downtown City Hall for a while. So I have spent a lot of time as the human service and healthcare space. I'm the ranking member on the human service side, and then the second ranking member on the healthcare side. So I spend a lot of time thinking about this public health.
All right, ranking member.
I'm gonna tell you
that means I'm not the chair because I'm in the minority, but I give them head. But and then I also serve as a national fellow on a couple of national healthcare of foundations. And so everything from public health, which is the space we live in, the air we breathe, the food we eat, communicable diseases, to the delivery of healthcare. And then I spend a lot of time on the healthcare system, the payment side of things, and how the insurance companies work or don't work for you. We have, like, United Healthcare is stationed in Minnesota's seventh biggest company. It's number 7 on Fortune 500. It's the biggest healthcare insurance company, I think maybe in the world, certainly in the country, is here with a lot of other companies that are here. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how to get this right. We did all the things that California did, Medicaid for all, every single, we have an insurance exchange. We even have a program for people, working class people, that are 133 to 200% of poverty. I'm really showing off now, Lila.
You are. That's all right. That's all right.
We have a good exchange. So we have a good system, but with that being said, we still have healthcare problems in people of color, in particular in African American communities, and healthcare disparities that look like the South. And people are perplexed with that. And the experts around the country says, how can you have such a good healthcare system, but you have high infant mortality rates in communities of color, and you got these healthcare disparities? And it isn't just about access. It's really about culture and the way that African Americans and other people of color, my East African brothers, Somali brothers, and Latinos are treated, and how that works. That is creating the healthcare disparities, as well as the public health space, because we know that 90% of your healthcare is what you put in your body, the air you breathe, and what you're exposed to, and the healthcare delivery is just a reaction to that.
Right.
Wow.
Well, I wanted to bring up a quote, I guess, by Robert Smith, the billionaire, independent Black billionaire, the brother that gave money to the graduates at Morehouse. He said, we can't let this crisis go to waste. And this was specifically to COVID and how we repair. So all of these, like, disparities that are being revealed, it's kind of clear. You see now a lot more allies being open about understanding that it's the systemic, racism, right? Plunder. And that's been happening to, Black Americans, African Americans. So now with the compound of this issue right here, on the back end of this, what do you see as you've mentioned a lot of great things, so it might sound redundant a little bit, but how do we as a community mobilize to take advantage of the repair of this nation, right? The repair of Minnesota, because we often get left out, and quite frankly, the biggest issue with our community is that we were, put out here with no real support, from this nation that had us in bondage for so long. And we've seen them undergird European peasants. And, as Martin Luther King said, year after year, everybody gets support but us. So how do we moving into the repair phase? Because this will pass, right? Like, at some point, this will net out to what it's going to be. What should we be thinking or doing, to take advantage of this moment?
Well, I'll start with this. I think that we are always trying to figure that out. Like, the burden becomes on us to undo what you did to me, right? And then if I can't figure that out, then it's my fault again, right? Like, so in the election space, right? What happens is because I'll speak as a Democrat, because I don't want to presume anybody is a Democrat just because they're Black. I think that could be a problem. But let's just use that as an example. Democrats will say, if the Black people get out, we'll win. Right? In Alabama, Doug Jones won because of Black women, right? We got to have Obama-esque numbers, right? Like, you hear these things. And then what happens is we get in, and then, to President Obama, Mitch McConnell said after 2 years, his number one job is to get Obama out, not to make the country better, not to have a conservative, but just to get after him. So then when he didn't get it done, right, then people are trying to figure out what's going on. If you go to Alabama, Doug Jones wins, and then he says, and I know people work for his campaign, I think he's a good person, but he's like, well, I can't quite do that, because then I can't have, because the white folks won't vote for him. Well, white folks can put you in, right? Like there may be white folks in Alabama who voted for him, but what got him in, what tipped scales, was Black women, right? Like that's what it is. So here it's the same thing. If we get in, then what happens is it becomes me and a couple other folks to do it. And then if it doesn't get done, then Black folks say, man, why couldn't you get it done? And this kind of thing. So we're always kind of fighting that. And I'm okay with standing in front of people and doing that. But let me give you a different spin on it. What COVID did is because it was a pathogen that you couldn't see, it wasn't exclusive to us. It still might have hurt us more. But in Minnesota, because of our demographics, the number one demographic, we're number two. The number one was 60 to 80-year-old white folks who were living in a congregate living center, nursing home, or like it got grandma and grandpa, right? So all of a sudden now, and we often become the carriers of that because the caregivers, right, a lot of times look like us and they may not know they have it and they're trying to figure it out. So we're on the lower end of the spectrum. But if we get something, that pathogen did not, it didn't say, oh, I'm only going to get this person and that person. It just is in the air. So they started to understand that we're connected. And if our condition isn't right, and we're always subjected to only having these subsets, so these non-media or these small jobs, important jobs, but low-paying jobs, the cat that drives the bus, fast food worker, all of those frontline jobs that interface the public, they really started to understand that if we're the only ones that got it and our condition is not where it's at, we're going to give it to you. So one, I think that people have to look at that differently, realize we're all connected. And then I'll tell you that though there was a disproportionate amount of people of color that got burnt out here just a couple of days ago, Target still every single Target in Minnesota is closed. Because they were coming after them all. So that's a lot of cheese, right? The AutoZones, the Wendy's. So, I got a good friend who happens not to be Black that has the biggest liquor store in our district. And also he's a developer. And he, I was working with him. He got bombed out, right? So, there's a lot that you see. That means that there's no, so not only do you lost your business, but you lost the revenue that comes from business. You lost so you ain't got no revenue, you can't pay your taxes. Can't pay your taxes, how state's supposed to run the so we're all connected. So what I'm imploring is that not only do we lead, and I'll continue to lead, but I gotta have these allies, I gotta have these other folks that don't look like me, who recognize that when it's good for me, it's always gonna be good for everybody. I got to say, when it's good for Black folks, it's good for everybody, right? Unfortunately, that's where we're at.
And I think that's key right now. While people seem to have that consciousness, right? Like it appears that everybody is understanding that if it is good for us, it's good for everybody else. So it's important, I guess, for us to make those asks, or not be left out. Because again, there's going to be aid given, just as with COVID. And like moving into the HEROES Act, what do you feel about this next HEROES Act that's on the table? Is there enough for us? And again, I don't want to, we are Americans, right? Like we're all a part of, the big picture, but we often get overlooked. So, what do you feel about the HEROES Act? And
I'm hoping that the Congressional Black Caucus and others, we're woefully, we don't have enough senators to really change the game there. But, Cory Booker and I guess Kamala, y'all senator, I don't think you in California, but we have some and their voices are loud. But I think the Congressional Black Caucus has to make sure that because the HEROES Act is going to give a lot of money out, but it's also going to give a lot of money directly to cities. So the CARES Act was COVID related only. So you could not replace revenue that you lost, right? You could only use it for expenditures for COVID. The HEROES Act not only does a bunch of that and puts a bunch of money out there, but also does a revenue recapture for cities and municipalities and state that lost money due to the revenue, i.e. the taxes lost for closing down everything. We have to be involved. So I'm on the National Black Caucus state legislators. So they're weighing in pretty strongly there. Shout out to Gila Hunter Cobb in South Carolina. She's phenomenal. But they're doing, that's why I know Holly Mitchell from LA was active before she got turned out. Did she make it on the Board of Supervisors? I didn't follow her race. She was running in LA.
I'm
not certain.
I'll take a look, but she was phenomenal. But we're looking at that. But they're going to have to make the same stand that we're going to have to make in Minnesota, which is to get in the way of things getting done unless we get our fair share. Secondly, I would hope that the rest of the country looks at this as not simply because they're looking at replacing what was already there because things are working for them. Right. So we don't want to go back to normal. We want to change. Normal wasn't that good for us. And now what's happening is devastating. So we have to be innovative and smart. And then we have to be able to get a piece so that we can catapult and elevate, which not only includes economic development money, but listen, we got to get this healthcare thing right throughout the country. And we got to get this education thing together that includes funding HBCUs and not letting them fall down, but also going in and not having the same tired conversation between corporate folks who want to dismantle public schools and public school unions who want the status quo. We're going to have to find a third way. I'm a fellow on that issue too, by the way.
Right.
But we got to find a third way on this issue. Shout out to the Keene Institute at Duke University, but they are helping us to understand that there has to be a third way and that this has to be culturally specific and relevant. Ahmad and I, our buddy, he talks a lot about that issue of, culture, and it's who's teaching you is as important as what you're being taught. Right, and how they're teaching you, and our kids are being ran out the room and being put on special education programs and Title IV and special education just because they aren't interested in what you're talking about, and they got nothing to do with if they're smart, are intelligent, are creative, right? They learn.
To interrupt you real quick, but I was in special ed as a child. I was put in special ed. In the fifth grade, third or fourth grade, I was put in special ed. So,
I graduated from an alternative high school, you know what I mean? So, because, it just didn't interest me to just sit there and listen to what you had to say. So I just went to other people. I went to Marcel's class. I went to other people's class, see what was going on there. And the school system had no accountability, so they didn't care what you did as long as you wasn't being disruptive. Then you go wherever you want. So there was no level of accountability. They didn't care. And so we gotta come up with new models that are sustainable to teach our children. And so as we move forward, if we're going to start with a fresh start, we should put it all on the table.
Right. Which leads me to HR.
We got to put it all on the table.
Sorry, Lila. I was going to.
Let me just say this, because I think this is important. And Senator Hans is all about repair, right? All about reparations. Like this is his mantra.
I mean, maybe I need to change the name because
no, you shouldn't. You don't have to.
Like skittish.
No, you don't have to. We need no. I think it's important.
Right.
It's important. We need repair and we need relief. But I think one of the things that is crucial is as it trickles down. So yes, we have our people in office and we have to vote and we have to follow legislature and all of those things. But just like with healthcare, the messages that get communicated to our communities, we have to figure out how a language that penetrates because there's the lack of trust. And so people don't want to go to the doctors because of how they're treated and a lack of trust. And I'm not going to apply for these grants and these business loans and these other monies that are available to me because I'm not going to get them anyway. And so we got to figure out how to have these conversations and get information to the people who need them the most and sort of change the verbiage so there becomes more and more trust and examples in real time of this is available to you. It's happening. I got it. He got it. They got it. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to you, Hans, for using your platform to
push that. And I think my theme is entitlement, right? I think Black people do not move with entitlement enough. Like we move in spaces where we're so gracious to be there because traditionally, that was the mindset, is to keep your head down, don't make too much noise, be happy to be there. But I think what leads me to kind of stand so firmly and strongly on reparations is my entitlement, is knowing my history here and knowing that my forefathers literally fought in the Civil War and wouldn't have won it without their support, and, I try to speak to my friends and colleagues, because right now, a lot of these big systems are reaching out and asking, what can they do to help? And I'm, really impressing upon them is to make it clear, like, yo, you need to slide some of that privilege across the table. Like this needs to it needs to add up to our contribution. And right now it doesn't. So, I'm going to live and die by the reparative justice, economic justice, which Klobuchar said on the news yesterday. It's like you got non-Black white senators saying that the Black community needs economic justice. When have we ever heard something like that?
Well, and I want to be careful here because it's a small city, and I'm the only Black dude. So Senator Klobuchar and Senator Smith are my friends, and I talk to them all the time. But let me say this though, and Amy knows I'll say this to her. We on that kind of level. But Amy and Tina, but you got to do it though. You know what I'm saying? So that's the point I'm making. I mean, literally, Amy Klobuchar went to the same high school. I got some little sisters that could be my children. My dad lives out in the western suburbs. They went to, same schools. And Senator Smith lives, I bet you, 6 miles to the east of where I'm sitting here. But you have to do more than say it. You got to actually do it, right? So that's the thing. You got to, if you were, we'll go back to Ahmad, he worked at Lavino and Google and Facebook. And I went out to the campus one time when I was in the Bay. I mean, the opulence, the amount of money that these folks have.
Unbelievable.
I mean, it's unbelievable. In my, second hometown of San Francisco, where my mother lives right now today, Lyle, at that same apartment building on Page Street in the Haight-Ashbury. She could only live there because of rent control. But if you go there, and I went there about a year and a half ago, she had fallen ill, so I was there 2-3 weeks, a little longer than I normally stay. So I got to go in the old neighborhood, and there's only one place left, which was a bar. Of course, I found that, and I sat around with a couple people who were still left, but everybody was new, and all the people who come to live there that wanted to come for the culture of San Francisco now are all there, took over, raised the prices, ran everybody out. So now all of the white kids who really wanted the culture was looking at me as some grand guru to tell them stories of how culturally relevant we used to be, and the barbershop that used to be down the block, and the nightclub, and the chicken shack, and the Fillmore district where Charlie Bird and all these Miles Davis used to play. It's all gone. So the point that I'll be telling to these kind of young white folks in the tech industry and these venture capitalists and stuff is that, you got to give some of that money back. You got big chunks of money that you'll never see. The dude made Salesforce, and everybody I talk to is the biggest building in San Francisco. You see it all over as a phallic symbol just because he could.
Right.
But that's the kind of games that gets played because you have so much money. You just gonna put a big phallic symbol.
Right.
I know this is a G-rated show. Just because you could, like a college fraternal prank, and we're suffering. But right below it is all these homeless people, or the rest of my friends. I don't have a single friend living in the city. I'm from San Francisco. I say the city. Everybody lives 30, 40, 50, 90 miles away. Sacramento, Antioch,
they can't afford
Central Valley now because they can't afford it.
Right.
No, if I go to San Francisco, I went to high school there. I can't see a single person. But if I go 50 miles away, I see every single cat I grew up with. But they got to commute in to get there. So they don't get to spend family time. If their child gets sick, they got to figure it out. It takes them 2 or 3 hours to get in and out of the city every day. I don't know how we got the snow and below zero, some other issues there, but I don't know if I could want to live in the Bay if I had to have that type of living environment. How can I enjoy what the beauty of San Francisco is if I never get there?
Sure. Wow. Well, I know we come into a hard stop for you at 12:50. I'm loving what I'm hearing. I just want to ask one last question. Like, how can we support you? Not just myself being in entertainment, where I have a lot of concerned colleagues that want to really lend a voice, lend a hand. What can we do to support you in your efforts?
Well, first of all, things like this are phenomenal. Thank you guys for allowing me to kind of, talk to you about what's going on in Minneapolis, what's going on here. I think that, just in the meantime, whatever, kind of support, we're going to kind of put some relief efforts up, and people could do the traditional way. We've had some people to come and visit and really kind of raise the voice, but this is not Minnesota specific. This is all over. So I think the best thing we could do is in our sphere of influence, where our hometown is, if that's the one that we, if it's LA because you live there now, where you come from, wherever it is that you are going to have to get involved. Get involved politically. Make sure you're supporting your political candidates. Get involved in your community, right? Think about if you got a couple dollars, one less chain, right? And put that into the hood, right? Go find some mentees and some young women and young men and kind of get them going the right way. And then with you guys being in the creative space, which, I'm totally into and please don't let them cancel our culture. Please lift up our culture. We have so much to offer. You guys are so incredibly talented. And I often feel like our culture starts to get canceled and takes a back seat. And we talked about the PLCI. Please lift that up. Find these young Black actors behind the scenes, work you're doing live as the entertainers, give them the best advice that they got, but really push up our culture and make sure that our young folks know who came before them, right? And understand that their plight so that those that do make it don't squander the opportunity by simply buying something that ain't going to be worth nothing in the next year.
Right. Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Listen,
for those at home don't know, I wasn't wearing camouflage until I saw him wearing camouflage, and I said, I got to be military minded. This is definitely a war, a game of inches, a game of consistency and focus. So thank you all for joining us today, and Senator Hayden will definitely be in touch.
I really appreciate it. Good talking to you guys. Let's talk soon.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Be good.